Good evening, Professor Clemens. Today I'm going to be talking about forming relationships and why we form relationships with certain people. First question is, why do we develop relationships with other people? I think that we develop relationships with other people for various reasons, whether we have similarities in common, whether that be our religion, our customs, our beliefs, our political views. We tend to form, those relationships with people. Also, if we are attracted by them, we tend to form more of a romantic, intimate relationship with people. And then another reason would be if we're just curious about their culture and their background being different from ours. So we have that curiosity and wanting to get to know a little bit more about that culture, then we tend to form relationships with those folks as well. Second question is, how do we get to know our friends and romantic partners? I feel for the most part that getting to know our friends should take time. And it's always best if it takes a little bit longer because you get to know the person a little bit better, although that always doesn't happen. But it is important, especially with intercultural friendships, that you invest that time, you take that time to really get to know their background because it's going to be completely different than yours. And again, it may or may not, at the end of the day, be that different, but it is important to get to know their culture, their beliefs to full extent so that you're not disrespecting in any way or stereotyping in any way based on your assumptions. Romantic relationships also should take time. You should also get to know the person really well before you decide to share your space or be together with that person. It doesn't always happen, either. Sometimes you just kind of jump into the relationship because it could be for different things. You're either lonely or you're just in that place of your life that you needed somebody else to kind of comfort or have that comfort with. But I believe that romantic relationships should be taken serious, and you should take that time and invest to getting to know that person, especially when you have to bring them around your family and your children. Quick relationships or just jumping into a relationship is not a good idea. How do we form relationships with people with whom we want to become friends? Again, it does take time, especially if you're wanting to have a long-term relationship. But you get to form those relationships by inquiring more about, what it is that they're into, what it is that they like to do, what are their customs, what are their beliefs, how are their upbringings, and sometimes they're a little different than yours for the most part. When you are forming relationships with people that are outside of your culture, they are going to be different, and you are going to learn. From my experience, I think I talked about it in one of the postings. Just having more confidence was something that I gained from my intercultural relationships or friendships, you could say. So things that I would typically shy away from or tend not to speak up about, just by observing how they behaved around people. And just by that, having our conversations, they made me feel confident. And it allowed me to express myself and talk about my beliefs or what it is that I believe without having to apologize or just be quiet because I either felt that I wasn't going to say the right thing or I was scared of what I could, be perceived as if I didn't have that right answer. Just having that confidence that I saw in them when they spoke in a group really helped. How do we get to know people who are different from us? Are these relationships different from those characterized by similarity. In a sense, they are a little different. Again, I think we get to know people that are different from us only if we have that. We talked about it in the reading, but that motivation to get to know people that are different. If we don't, then you probably won't get to know many people that are different from you because you're not taking the time to actually get to know how, their upbringings were, what their beliefs are, their customs. So the second part says, are these relationships different from those characterized by similarity? At the beginning, they are a little different, but I think that you keep that relationship with that other person because you end up finding things, views that are similar. So they're not too different in a sense. And again, getting to know them is going to be a little bit different than from people that you already know, because people that you have the same customs, beliefs, similar things that you can identify with, it's a lot easier to hold a conversation, and it's a lot easier to just feel that you can, start speaking, and you'll have a good conversation going. Whereas if it's somebody that is different from your cultural upbringings, you may not know how to initiate that conversation or what to say at first. So as we talked about it before, taking the time to get to know that other person's culture, if you really are interested in having a relationship with that person, is extremely important. What are some of the criteria we use to determine whom we want to form friendships with and whom we don't want to be associated with? Some of the criteria could be our things that, as I talked about before, if it's something that you really like about that person, whether it be their presence, the way that the way that they speak in a group, it could be something that you look up to, that it is something that you possibly don't do, and that you want to get a little bit more encouragement. Then those are criteria that you would utilize to say, hey, let me get to know this person a little bit more, so that at the end of the day, it can give you that push that you need or that courage that you may need. Other criteria, I would say, is just, you're intrigued or you're enlightened by how they do things and how their culture is. And it could be different than yours. It may not be the same, but you appreciate the way that they do things and you're getting to know them. And then it says, form friendships with whom we don't want to be associated with. So again, if there's something that you can't identify with, then that's probably a relationship you don't want to be associated with. If it's an individual or a person that does something that's against your beliefs, you probably don't want to be associated with that person or form a relationship with. But you wouldn't know that unless you got to know them. And it just kind of all ties in on why it's important to getting to know people when you form intercultural relationships and just relationships in general. It's very important. And I believe that is the end. So thanks again, and thank you for listening, and have a good night.